there. All right, let's go over to Audacity. Okay. All right, we're going to do the count in. Drew, you ready?
Go ahead.
All right. 5, 4, 3.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is episode number 24, I think.
That's right, 24.
24 of the Recovery Lab podcast series. I'm Drew Hassan.
I'm Daniel Anderson.
And we're here today with the one and only Malcolm White this morning.
Welcome, Malcolm.
Thank you. So glad to be here, guys.
Well,
Yes,
we
sir.
appreciate your being here. I know that what everybody looks forward to is coming up here on a Sunday morning to be grilled about their life. But no, in all honesty, thank you for giving your time this morning. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So the typical intro is the same. If you know of something out there that could be of some benefit to somebody in recovery, like where the free Narcan is, or if you've got an inroad to help somebody get into treatment or don't mind taking them to a treatment center or just something beneficial, comment, post about it, let the community at large know, and then additionally comment with any suggestions or criticisms. Let us know how we can do better or what we can do that might improve things. I think that's, oh yeah. And as always, please go to recoverylabllc.com and buy a hoodie. They are fantastic hoodies, very handsome.
Yeah. Top notch, top of the line. Everything is premium with these things. I got to say,
top shelf.
I take it. I say it every week, but I take a shower in them. I wear them to bed. Everything.
It's instantly makes you more attractive.
It really does. Yeah.
Your wife
how
will
I
be
got
all
married.
over
Yeah,
you.
That's how I got married. It was that hoodie. So, yeah.
They're cheap and very attractive, so it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And you support us.
And you support us. Well, look, without further ado, Malcolm, thank you, man. Thanks again.
Great. Happy Sunday morning.
Happy Sunday morning. Absolutely. All right, so we have the 40th Howell's,
Right. Formerly Mal's
St. Patty's Day Parade coming up, and it's going to be the third week in March. Is that right?
Fourth.
The fourth week. Okay, so we don't
March 25.
All right, so we're not going
And
to.
there's a reason that people get that confused. I get it. It used to be the third Saturday.
Okay, and this way we don't have to worry about spring break.
Correct.
Is that right?
That's one of the reasons it's no longer the third Saturday. The other one is when we reconstituted with the Sweet Potato Queens. They were with us the whole journey, and they broke off many years ago, started their own event called the Zippity Doo-Dah in Fondren. They did that for years, and then we decided they were going to rejoin us some years ago. I don't remember how many, but they were parading on the fourth weekend, and when we brought them back into our umbrella, we decided to take their date, which was the 4th, in an attempt to get away from this long sort of nagging problem of spring break. So it has been from that day forward the 4th Saturday in March, which is the 25th in 2023.
Awesome. All right, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Where did the idea for the parade come from?
Well, I grew up in South Mississippi, and parading was a part of culture. We went to the Gulf Coast for Mardi Gras parades. We went to New Orleans. Mobile, of course, is where Mardi Gras began. And so living in Stone County, Mobile and New Orleans were very close to geographically to where I grew up, and they were culturally where we looked to for culture. And I was very accustomed to parades and celebrations.
Moon pies.
And so, I lived in New Orleans in the mid-'70s, worked there in the French Quarter, again, Jazz Fest, St. Patty's Day, St. Joseph's Day, Mardi Gras. There was a celebration for everything. And that was the life that I was familiar with and what I liked. And when I moved to Jackson in 1979 for 1 year, I brought that with me. And when I got here, I was shocked that the only celebrations of record were the Dixie National Rodeo, the Christmas parade, the Jackson State homecoming, and after that, it was a real struggle.
Did they have Jubilee Jam?
No,
Then?
that was all part of my life.
Okay.
They had a thing called the Jackson Arts Festival, which had happened in the, I guess, mid to early 70s, but it was kapunked by the time I got here, and so that wasn't there. Jubilee, you know, I was around for the creation of and the sort of launching of Jubilee Jam. I actually produced Jubilee Jam for a lot of years, but so it was not here.
Okay. Well, all right. So there had to be.
Oh, and I didn't answer your question.
No,
So
go ahead.
when I was in the restaurant business, I came here to run Oliver's. I eventually ran George Street Grocery. I had other clubs, other entertainment establishments. But by the time I got to George Street Grocery in the very early 80s, I really had this itch for events, for special occasions, for celebration. I started doing Mardi Gras parties, St. Patrick's parties, at George Street. And they were very successful, and I could tell people really were interested in having those here. And I surmised when I moved here that it was a town where people worked, worshiped, raised their kids, but for entertainment and fun, they went somewhere else. They either went to New Orleans or Destin or Memphis, but it was not a party town. It was a family town, and which I have no problem with, but I wanted to live where people celebrated culture and arts. So when I was at George Street, I came up with this idea of having a little street parade. I first thought it was a pub crawl, and then I made it into a parade. And I just simply said, I'm going to do this, and I went out and got some sponsors. And, 1983, we started at CS's and ended at George Street. It was just a few hundred of friends of mine, and, just sort of, the reason it took off was, A, people wanted it to happen. They were curious. And B, we went on a Thursday during rush hour traffic, and it created a huge traffic jam in downtown Jackson, which got a lot of publicity. And that got the Jackson Police Department involved. People couldn't understand why they had given me a permit. And it created a lot of publicity, which I milked, which I recognized as a promoter.
Absolutely.
And I milked this,
People were mad they couldn't get Pat's roast beef on Thursday. Was that it?
They were well, it was at 4:30 in the afternoon. So they
Okay.
were trying to leave work and go home. And they were all jammed up in this traffic jam because we'd blocked off all the streets. And they were, hundreds of cars deep. Back then, everybody worked in downtown Jackson. They were honking their horns and waving their arms. And I thought it was in celebration. It turns out they were angry. And anyway, it created this enormous publicity storm, which I just took advantage of and started talking about. Well, next year we'll do it on a Saturday, and we won't do this. But let's keep talking about this parade and this celebration. And they did, and it went on, and TV stations, newspapers wrote about it anyway. So it just became a phenomenon. By year 2, we were already fairly well known.
So what year was this? This would have been
83?
83.
83.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Sorry. Now I've answered your question, Dan.
Yeah. So were there any fears about the parade not becoming a success? Was there? But it sounds like after that first year, you had a pretty good idea that this was going to be something that was sticking around. Were there any fears that you dealt with in planning and kind of morphing this into what it is today, or has it just kind of gone organically and grown and grown its own leg, so to speak, over the years?
Well, there was no fear.
You were just have to have fun.
I was doing something that I was making up as I went along. There was no real prototype. I was creating events. I was trying to establish celebrations. And in that same block of time, I created Zoo Blues. I was a part of Jubilee Jam, St. Patty's Day, Wells Fest, which I created during that same period. I had a program called Christmas by the River that I did. No one remembers it because it only lasted 2 years. But I was just throwing the proverbial spaghetti at the wall.
Sure.
I wanted to do this. This is what I wanted to do. And I was trying all sorts of stuff. People would call me up and say, we need to do a fundraiser. You know, we need an event. Come up with something. And I would. And so I found myself being a promoter, producer of special events. The parade was one of many. It happened to strike a nerve with the community. People loved it, and because everybody could participate. And so it took off instantly. It was very organic, and it grew, all by itself, though, I was fueling it. Jill Connor Brown and I, Jill created a career from this, right. And so did I. So it was, again, in that business, some things work and some things don't. You just never really know. You put it out there, you see if people are interested in it. If they're interested in it, it will succeed if you do your work. And if they're not, it'll go away and you can try something else.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. So,
but no fear.
No fear.
I never thought about fear.
That's awesome.
I just thought, can I get sponsors? Will I get people to come? Will people like this idea? And that was just all about planning, organizing, doing due diligence, making sure that I had a permit, making sure that I had barricades, making sure, that sort of stuff. Now, at the end of Jubilee Jam, I was fearful because I had become the producer, and I was on the line for hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. And if it didn't work, it was my money. And at the very last Jubilee that I produced, I lost $125,000. And at the time, I thought I was about bankrupt. But I wasn't. But it was a difficult lick. Now, Jubilee Jam had been incredibly successful up until that point. But ultimately, several years of bad weather just got us. If you're outside and you can't perform, people don't come. And if they don't come, there's no way to cover your expenses.
Right.
So anyway, got off on Jubilee Jam.
Awesome. I love it. All right. As you have matured over the past 40 years, and Lord knows you have matured over the past 40 years, have your thoughts of what you want the parade to represent shifted in any way? And if so, walk us through the progression of that shift.
Sure. Yeah, in the beginning, it was more of just a kind of wacky idea, and maybe it was about trying to figure out how to make a living off of doing these things, which I had no prototype for. But it quickly evolved into what I consider a cultural celebration, a rites of spring, a town telling its story. And I moved to that pretty quickly. I realized that it was more than just people drinking beer and putting on a silly hat. It was about hometown, homecoming, family, friends. People came to Jackson for this. Prior to that, everybody went away from Jackson to celebrate. I really felt like we had accomplished something by saying, this is a hometown celebration. Not only do you not have to go out of town, but your out-of-town friends will come here and hang out with you, and they'll think it's cool to be in your town. Right. And I picked up on that pretty quick, and that became sort of my goal. It became my career. That's why I worked at the Mississippi Arts Commission. That's why I became the Mississippi Tourism Director. That's why I created Hal and Mouse. That's why I did all of this stuff. I had this mantra that, our story is our greatest asset. If we tell it and tell it well, wonderful things happen. We create economic development. We create business, and we create civic pride. And I believe that. I think these things are about, telling our story and not running out of town every time, it's the weekend to tell someone else's story. But anyway, that's how I perceived it, and that's how it evolved from just a wacky idea into sort of a profession, a concrete thing. And I later named it the Mississippi's creative economy, and I launched a career around it. You know, I convinced Governor Haley Barbour that this was a real thing. I did a study of Mississippi's impact from the creative sector, and I began to.
You had data. You were prepared
Right
with
on.
data. Yeah.
And so that's what it is to me. It's not about a funny hat and a beer. It's about civic pride. It's about a town telling its story. And that's why it's black and white, male, female, young people, old people. It's all inclusive, and its attempt is to talk about who we are and you know how we live and what our story is.
Beautiful. All right. So your goal was from the very beginning to create something that was uniquely Jackson, right? Something that was all ours, right? What are some of the things that set the Howell's St. Patty's Day Parade apart from, say, other St. Patty's Day parades?
Well, this one, again, I think I called it the People's Parade all the time. You didn't have to be in a crew or a club. You didn't have to
clique.
You didn't have to be invited by me. It was open to the public. Any and everybody could participate. People would say, well, we want to be involved. And I would say, you are involved. Get yourself a float, come up with a theme, give $200 to the Children's Hospital, you're in. Or if you don't have $200 and you don't have a bunch of friends, just put on a silly outfit and I'll see you Saturday at 1 o'clock and just join in.
Right.
And everybody realized that it was their parade. It wasn't my parade. It wasn't my brother's parade. It wasn't Hal and Mal's parade. It wasn't the city of Jackson's parade. I've been very careful from the beginning to say it's the people's parade. If you say you're in it, you're in it. If you want to be a part of this, you're a part of it.
Right.
Now, there may be some clubs or cliques or crews out there that it's by invitation only and to be in their group. But if they don't invite you, come see me and I'll get you invited to some other group,
right.
You know. So that is the reason that I think it works and the reason it has worked all these years. And I forgot what the actual question was.
Well, the question, what sets the Howell's St. Patty's Day Parade apart from, say, other parades that, what are some different things that this parade offers that others don't?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's not a traditional St. Patrick's parade. It's obvious. You know, it's not about St. Patrick. It's loosely based on the story of the patron saint of Ireland, but it's more about the rites of spring. It's about spring coming to Jackson, spring coming to Mississippi, and it's much more akin to Mardi Gras than it is St. Patrick's Day. So it's a hybrid. And it's open to everyone. If there are two things that make it different, I would say those are the two things.
You mentioned Mardi Gras. How did your love for Mardi Gras kind of shape how you went about planning what you would like the parade to become?
Well, the throws, I was big on throws. There were several clubs down there in New Orleans that I mimicked. Like the group I march in, the O-Tuck Society, that's a riff off of the St. Joseph's Day Parade in the French Quarter, where all these Italian men put on tuxedos and sashes, carry canes of flowers, and hand them out a flower for a kiss. Now, in 2023, we don't do a lot of kissing anymore, but in the old days, we'd kiss a stranger for a flower. We now sort of do a little peck on the cheek or a pat on the head and hand out a flower. But I ripped that completely off from these men marching in the French Quarter at St. Joseph's Day when I lived in the French Quarter and worked in the French Quarter, ran the Bourbon Orleans Hotel, and I saw this and I thought, I like that component. And then the throws, the beads, the cups, the candy, you know, I saw that at Mardi Gras, both on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I saw it in Mobile and I saw it in New Orleans, and I realized that's why a lot of people come, because they want stuff. So those two things, And then just the idea of dressing up, being wacky, having fun,
letting loose.
just enjoy yourself. So I think that's the way it's related and not related at the same time.
Cool. Would you say that that you getting sober had affected or has affected in any way, shape, or form what you want the parade to represent, or was that something that was kind of just unique to Malcolm all along throughout all different phases of your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I got sober on the 31st day of January in 2005, and Danny, you and I were in Copac together. That's the first time I ever laid eyes on you.
I remember driving in your Ford Explorer to an outside meeting.
There you go. So several things happened while I was at Copac. One was I turned 53. Two, my daughter had a birthday while I was out there. And three, the parade occurred because I arrived in late January and I was out there until almost February. Well, March, actually. I'm sorry. I was out there actually till April. I stayed for the full meal and then aftercare. I did 3 months of in treatment and a full aftercare part as well. But I remember this so well. You know, I had to know that I had to let all that go and focus only on my sobriety, which I was doing at Copac after I fought it for a good month.
Sure.
I was a total turd for a month.
Yeah.
I got in so much trouble because I wouldn't take my cap off.
A renegade.
I kept a list of everything that was wrong with Copac and things that they needed to fix. And
They needed a parade, didn't they?
I was constantly presenting this to the treatment team, and of course they would just roll their eyes and laugh and say, you know, just keep
Go to
working the
group,
process.
Malcolm.
But anyway, so as it approached parade time, I went to my counselor, a guy named David Germany, who I love dearly. I haven't seen in a while, but
He's doing well. He's at the VA.
David's part of the reason I'm here. He helped save my life, but he was hard on me, and he told me on the front end, he said, I'm going to be extremely hard on you because you have the capability and the possibility of helping a lot of people. So I don't want to mess this up with you. I was like, whatever. But he and I fought a lot. We argued, a lot of confrontations. But when it came around to parade time, I put in for a TL to go to the parade. You know, I'm in a recovery center, and it only made sense to me that I would be let out to go lead thousands of drunks down the street.
Right,
I mean, that made sense to me.
Right,
right?
yeah.
So David said, I tell you what you do, Malcolm. It's probably not going to happen. But what I want you to do is I want you to write a press release stating that you will not be attending or leading the parade this year, and bring it to me and let me read it. So I wrote this press release, Malcolm White, founder of the Malice St. Patty's Day Parade, will not attend the parade this year. And I wrote all this stuff out. I was in a treatment center, blah, blah, blah.
Was that hard? Was that hard?
Of course it was. It was
Yeah.
designed to be hard.
Yeah.
So I took it to David, and he said, read it out loud. So I read it, and he, how does that make you feel?
Right,
blah, blah,
right,
blah,
right.
blah, blah. And so he said, we'll talk about it. Sort of. So I thought, well, that's that. I'm not going. So, a little later, 2 or 3 days later, he called me in, and he said, we've decided to grant your TL request. We're going to let you go to the parade.
Wow.
And so,
Oh, they made you sweat it for a while, didn't
of
they?
course they did. So off I go, and I don't know how many hours they gave me, 5 or 6 hours, and it had to be structured, as y'all know. I had to tell them everywhere I was going, everything I was going to do. But anyway, so I did show up at Hallowell's, stone sober, and we always carried these flowers and beads, or these different things. That year I carried a broom. And as I marched through the parade, I sort of swept the broom, and I was, metaphorically cleaning my side of the street. But anyway, it went off without a hitch. I got back sober, and so that was how I experienced the parade sober for the first time. So that was the 22nd parade. So now it's 18 years later. But I have a lot of sober friends who march with me in my group. I don't think about it really anymore. I don't drink, and that's that. So if other people are drinking, good for them. You know,
Right.
It's a non-issue for me. I haven't really changed that much about the parade since I've gotten sober. I've changed a lot about myself. You know, so if that sort of manifests itself as changes, I haven't noticed.
Right. It's something that's so much bigger than you are than you today. It's, you know, I can see how it would be kind of easy for you to be able to grow as a human yourself and still let the parade be what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a place for people to come and, you know, drink alcohol if they want to drink alcohol, have a good time, you know, like that's okay. And it's beautiful to me that you are okay with it being what it is. It's a beautiful thing to me. And I hold you in incredibly high regards for your ability to help it grow, but also realize that it's bigger than all of us. I mean,
Right.
it's our whole city, you know?
Yeah, it's not my parade. It was just my idea. And, you know, the metaphor is the parade is like all of life. I don't control that. I don't get to say what people do and don't do. I only control what I do. And there's not a person on the street that knows or doesn't know whether or not I've been drinking beer that day. And they could care less.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
They want one of my flowers.
Right.
They want me to wave at them. They want some beads. They want a smile. They want to be reassured that this is a thing that is good and positive. I mean, sometimes, you know, I see somebody who's had too much to drink, and I sort of, for a moment, I think, am I responsible for that? But then I know I'm not. It's
Right.
none of my business.
No.
My business is to produce this entertainment piece, and however people act is their responsibility.
Well, I guarantee you that right next to that person that may have had a little bit too much to drink is a young girl that's sitting there with her parents experiencing the parade for the first time and having just a wonderful, incredible experience. And that too falls back on that started with your idea. So there are going to be people that are going to be crazy. It's just part of it. But there's also 10 times more positivity and love and excitement and joy that surrounds that parade. So I wouldn't even stress about it.
Yeah, people over imbibe at Mississippi State football games. They over imbibe at the Neshoba County Fair. They over imbibe at the state fair. They over imbibe on a Saturday night. It's absolutely none of my business.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't. That's a choice, right?
Right. Absolutely. All right. Was the parade something you thought would turn into just the beautiful production it is today? I have a feeling, I have a thought that maybe deep down you always knew that this was going to be something that is going to go on for a long time and it's going to be a beautiful thing for years and years to come. But are you ever kind of blown away by the how it grows, how it's grown, and the production that it's truly become today?
I knew in year 3 that it had caught on. In my business, or what used to be my business, when you put something new out there, the first year, it's just, get through it, see what the response is. In year 2, you've sort of refined the idea and you've worked hard on what you observed in year 1. Year 3, it either is or it isn't. And
the novelty will have worn off.
You can figure it out. You can say this isn't going to work, or I'm beating my head against the wall here, or this has legs. And as a producer, promoter, and I knew in year 3 that I was on to an idea that had legs, that people loved it, everybody wanted it, and it unless I screwed it up, it was going to work.
Right.
So I knew that. But it blows me away every year when I turn down Capitol Street and I look and I see these people, and I think, wow, you know, this is a response to an idea that I had. But I had that same feeling, you know, at Jubilee Jam,
Sure.
at Zoo Blues, at Howlin' Mouths, if I had a big crowd, a big night. You know, I thought, wow, you know, this is interesting. You know, this is how it works.
Right.
Do you have any? Do you have any attendance estimates, or do you know any numbers? Is there any way to track that?
No, it's all made up, and and it's weird too because it's a catch-22. If I say it looks like 70,000 people, my insurance carrier says your insurance is 3 times what you told me it was.
Right.
If I say it looks like 20,000, then my insurance is more affordable. But the tourism people are less impressed. So I have multiple audiences who are interested in numbers. I don't.
The correct number is the one you signed on that insurance application. They will sue you for that.
Well, there's no way to know.
I told the truth to the insurance company.
First
That's
of
what
all, there
matters.
is no answer.
Right.
There's no entity that has ever attempted to calculate the attendance because they don't pay, they don't register, they don't go through any gate. They're just out there. There's no way to know. There's no way to know unless you hire. There are people who do this for a living. There are companies who will come to Jackson, and they have this sort of process where they will count a little group here and then multiply it by how many groups they see, and they will actually come up with a fairly reasonable number.
Computation.
But generally that's done by a tourism entity, like Visit Jackson or Visit Mississippi would do that. I have no interest in doing it. I don't care. I just know there's a lot of people out there, and it looks, I will say, it looks bigger than last year, or for a rainy day, this is a huge crowd. You know, I will make comments like that.
I've got some follow-up questions for you, but I don't want to trample on your.
No, okay. Well, we'll finalize this set of questions real quick, and then we'll jump into what you've got. Okay, so I was reading on the website, and one of the things that was touched on was the fact that the parade gives people ways to express themselves in ways that they otherwise would not be able to express themselves. Walk us through a little bit of those ways of how folks can come and not be ashamed, but express themselves and be 100% who they want to be that day.
Well, yeah, I think on that day, it's, you know, people can do and be what they want to be, as long as they're, you know, there's no nudity or acting out, whatever. I think it's one of those days where free expression is welcomed and encouraged, and people take advantage of that. There's a lot of wacky stuff out there, really interesting costumes.
Well, if I didn't know anything about the Sweet Potato Queens, if I just happened to see that, I would think, what on earth?
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You got these full-grown women dressed in these ridiculous outfits with
ridiculous wigs, and
extensions to their body parts, accentuated bottoms and tops, crazy wigs. There's even a guy out there in one of those dresses and wigs. But, you know, they're just doing their thing. They're having fun. They're tossing beads, and they're raising money for Children's of Mississippi, just like we all are. And, you know, if anything has changed, Danny, back to your question, is we're far more interested in how we benefit Children's of Mississippi now than we are in how much beer we sell. Sure. Maybe in the early days we may have been more interested in beer sales, but not so much anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's you know, it's a carte blanche day. It's a day away. It's a day apart. It's a day people can express themselves, tell their story, be wacky, have fun. So there's a lot of that. Yeah.
Just let loose.
Yeah. Let it bleed.
I love it. All right, Drew, what you got, brother?
So a few things. If you don't, how do you determine the metric for success if you're not you're not getting a per head taste of an entrance fee. So how does Malcolm go home and say, okay, this year all right, we avoided what happened at Jubilee Jam. This is
well, in terms of economics, I try to break even. We raise a lot of money. I raise $100,000 every year to do this.
So
this thing costs a lot of money.
You put up the money.
No, I raise it.
You raise the money from investors or
companies,
sponsors,
individuals,
and that pays for security. Those porta potties,
barricades are $35,000 to $40,000.
Get out.
Insurance is, but it's going to be $20,000 this year.
That's incredible. And then, perhaps was the hope that these people would march up and down the street and then go to Hal and Mal's and get beer?
No, I started this long before Hal and Mal's.
No kidding.
I started this in '83. Hal and Mal's opened in late '85.
Wow. I guess that goes to the testament.
And and my brother, this is another funny story. I now call it Hal after I believe that people die in two ways. They die physically when they stop breathing and their heart stops functioning. And then the second way people die is when people stop mentioning their name. The reason I renamed it for my brother is that people would have no choice but to never stop saying his name. And he would always be remembered. But he didn't even live here and probably wasn't even at the first parade. He was away doing something else. He didn't come here till 1984, 85 to join me in this wackiness that we call Hal and Mal's. So, but I renamed it for him because I could when he passed, and I wanted people to call his name. But it's funny that really he was not even involved. He marched with me probably in the second and third year. I don't even think Hal was at the first parade, which is cool. And people don't know that, and it doesn't matter, but it is interesting.
When did Hal and Mal's open?
Well, it opened in '85. We had evolved that building, the old GM&O Freight Depot that we occupy and I now own, had been vacant for many years, and I got the lease in '83. We put the Lamar there first. When the JRA bought the old Lamar Theater and tragically tore it down to build One Jackson Place, there was a bar in there called the Lamar, and it was a college bar. And it was open 2 nights a week, and it featured these show bands, and it was a phenomenon. And when it closed, we moved it from the theater to the Hal and Mal's building, and it operated in there until the drinking age was changed from 18 to 21. And when that happened, this business was gone, because that's what this was a college bar. So then we had a building with no business in it. And it was then that I went to my investors and my partners, and I said, I'll take the building if y'all don't want it. And they didn't. So that's when I called Hal, and I said, I have the building that we've been talking about all of our lives. I've got it. Come on down to Jackson, and let's do the restaurant. And we did.
Well, you have certainly done it. I mean, Hal and Mal's is coffee table book famous.
It's been in books. I mean,
it represents as much of Jackson as literally anything I can think of.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's pretty incredible.
Legitimately, I mean, it is an image of it is, any book about Jackson would have that in there.
Right. So
you open the restaurant, continue the parade. And
I moved the parade. I started at George Street because that's where I worked, and no one else would let me have a parade there. We moved it to the fairgrounds because by year 3 had already outgrown the George Street area. It was just too big. So we moved it to the fairgrounds. We were down there for a handful of years. And then when I opened Hal and Mal's, I said, I need to relocate this to a place with infrastructure, a building, bathrooms, because everything at the fairground was temporary. It was like setting up a temporary village.
Right.
It was expensive, and I had to give all the concessions to the state contractors. So there was no way to make any money. So we moved it to Hal and Mal's, probably about 86, 87, somewhere in there. but it preceded Howlin' Mouse, which a lot of people don't know. Many people refer to this as the Howlin' Mouse St. Patty's Parade. And that's fine and dandy. But when it started, it was just the Mouse.
I didn't know that until I was sitting right here.
Yeah.
And it started at George Street. Then it went to the fairgrounds, and it made its way to Howlin' Mouse.
You mentioned earlier about the civic pride that you hope to promote. And, I mean, I thought that was a beautiful way that you put that in growing our own stories. How do you feel about Jackson and the water problems and the failing infrastructure? I mean, that's got to be crippling to this idea of promoting civic pride.
Well, it's impactful, not crippling.
Okay.
We ain't dead yet.
I'll take it.
But let me tell you how I feel about the water problem. I feel about the water problem in Jackson the same way as I feel about recovery. Jackson had to hit a bottom. It took a long time. We kept blowing off this idea, ignoring this idea, hoping it would go away, patching it with duct tape and baling wire. And finally, one day, it got so damn bad that the national press started covering it. The Environmental Protection Agency came down on us. The Biden administration got involved. DOJ got involved. It was on every newscast all over the world. Jackson, Mississippi, and Flint, Michigan had achieved this place, this embarrassing place of having undrinkable water in America in 2023.
Well,
That's a bottom.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Flint, Michigan. Everybody remembers Erin Brockovich from the movie, but she was on Stephen Colbert's show one night, and she was talking about how the water problem is only going to get worse across the country.
That's right.
That it just so happens that Jackson seems to have been after Flint, Michigan,
the poster child.
The tipping point.
Yeah.
That every city is guilty of what Jackson has done, neglecting the infrastructure. And she said it basically has to do with there are two ways to clean water to deliver to the populace. One is cheap. One is expensive. The cheap way just happens to cause a corruption of the pipes from the inside out. I mean, I'm just regurgitating what she said. I'm not a scientist, but I think other cities are going to fall for the same reasons. And it's got to be, my heart breaks for people like you, for Pat Boland, for Jeff Good. I mean, Jackson seems to be doing everything it can to beg the remaining businesses to leave.
Yeah, it does seem that way. But again, I equate it to my own life, which is all I know. And here's what I know. From your bottom into recovery, you can be successful. And we are on our way back up. This $700 million is on its way. We have hired a third-party professional to take this over. There's nowhere to go but up. Things are getting better. And I believe we will turn this episode into, as you said, sort of a story of how an American city can recover from this and get it right and do better. And yes, our image has been damaged and tarnished and hurt and wounded, and those of us who are in business have suffered incredibly. I mean, we came out of COVID and right into two water crises, and the businesses are still open, deserve Nobel Prizes. What I decided in post-COVID and mid-water crisis was that I loved what I had created at Howlin' Mouse, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I was about to be 72, and it was really more than I wanted to do. I did not want this to be my final chapter, and it was wearing me out. So none of my kids wanted to take it over. There was only two options: sell it or find a buyer. And I was blessed to find, Damien and Mary Sanders Kavicki to buy it and to keep it going and to let the story continue to be told.
And look, kudos to them. I mean, Campbell's,
that was
Howlin'
tough.
Mouse. I mean, I salute people that try to keep these institutions going, because it can't be.
It's got to be hard.
It's hard under the best of circumstances
Yeah.
to run a profitable restaurant.
That's right. When everything's working, you get to make 4%. I mean, when everything, so nobody's making 4%.
Right. Look, I remember, so I worked at Walker's, was the first restaurant I ever worked at. And I learned about food costs. And I thought, surely their math is wrong. How are you, it's razor thin margins in the,
You know, it's a tough way to serve the Lord. But I decided in 1974, when I was at University of Southern Mississippi, about my fourth college to try, and I got a job as a dishwasher in a restaurant. I decided this was something that I would enjoy doing and I was pretty good at. And within a year, I was the assistant general manager of the Bourbon Orleans Hotel in the French Quarter. And
the cream rises to the top.
I was loving it. And I've really never done anything else. I mean, it's not just food and beverage, but it's entertainment and
Hospitality.
music, hospitality. But yeah, it's a tough business, and you know, we're fortunate. Yeah, I think that we have really great restaurants and entertainment spots here in Jackson. A lot of them have moved to the suburbs. That's fine. I don't care. People need to do what people need to do. They need to live in Madison, great. They need to live in Fondren, great. To me, Jackson is metro. You know, the three counties, to me, is Jackson, Mississippi.
Right.
I don't get hung up on what their address is or where they send their kids to school. And let's face it, schools drive residential selections, right? So I get it. But look, I love this place. I came here. It's been good to me. I've had great success. I got sober here, got married here, I've made business decisions here. I've had a lot of success here. It's a great place to live. It's unusual. It's different. It's not for everybody. It's a bit funky. But it's what I call home. It's, and I'm good with it. And
how does
it's been a good run.
One of the questions I came up with is, you are a staple of the Jackson community. How does that affect or impact your day-to-day life? Does the lack of anonymity bother you, or can it?
No, I got used to it a long time ago. I made this decision. I mean, I literally decided one time that part of my business strategy, or life strategy, was going to be someone who was a public person. I was a public person when I worked for the state. I was a public person when I ran Howlin' Mouse. I was a public person with the parade. It was a decision. Now, sometimes it gets old. And the older I get, the more I sort of work my way out of it.
Groom the next class.
Yeah, when people will say, "Oh, how am I? What, have you met Damian Kvicki?"
Right.
Oh, the St. Patty's Day parade. I'm like, "Oh, have you met Alex Coates, this young fellow I've hired to shadow me?" And one thing I want to say about the parade, I know we've sort of covered the parade, but in 2019, I turned the parade into a nonprofit. I established a fund at the Community Foundation, and I created a community advisory board, and we have hired a young fellow, Alex Coates, to learn how to be the director of the parade. And I did all that deliberately because it's a succession planning. It's preparing for the future. And this is a really important part. You'll never always be young and, able to do big ideas. Doesn't mean you won't have big ideas, but I'm
the energy and gusto to execute on them.
I'm grateful to be in this phase of my life where I'm teaching others and handing off and evolving and making my way. I spend much more of my time now being a grandfather than I do being a grand marshal. It's very different now. I don't mind being a grand marshal once a year. I don't mind being a public speaker. I don't mind showing up and doing things. But really, what I get off on is grandparenting.
What do they call you?
Bop. BOP.
I love it.
Love it too, man.
All right. Well, I have to say this before we're running out of time, but I want to openly express how I feel about you. Is when I was first getting started with my business, I reached out to you and you sold me my very first trailer for $300. So I want you, and since that moment, my business has grown leaps and bounds. But it all originated with that one first decision that you made to sell me that old beat up U-Haul trailer. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for being there for me when I was just getting my business started, and being supportive of me and my business throughout the years. You have been a big part of my life, and I'm very grateful to you for that.
Well, that's how recovery works. Sharing, helping others, being present. You and I met in this journey, and I thought that was a way to help somebody, and I did, and I'm glad it worked out, and I'm glad we're still here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're still standing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, Drew, do you have anything else that you'd like to ask, throw in?
I mean, I could sit here and ask you questions all day, but no. It's a fitting time to end it. It really is. Malcolm, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
We thank you for being here, and I really thank you for, the work you've done to promote Jackson. And Jackson is better for having had you move back here.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it, and good luck with this recovery lab and all the other enterprises that y'all are involved in, and look forward to seeing y'all in the rooms.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Malcolm.
My children have been quiet. Makes me wonder if they're playing with matches or if they left.